For 2 years, she did noon-hour sessions on a local television channel, and from those shows, she became known as in Simcoe County as a master gardener, Grandma Dunk. When she was chair of the Conservation and Environment Committee of the Ontario Horticultural Society, she chanced upon a plight of native bees, and that started her bee obsession. The Roadsides Program, which we'll be talking about today, was conceived in 2009, and since that time she has been encouraging gardeners to create native bee habitat along roadsides, on vacant land, and in their own gardens. So the topic today will be Pollinator Patches and the Roadside Program. So please join me in welcoming Caroline.
Okay, if you could turn down the lights while I'm waiting. This is my mascot. I don't know whether it's a cigarette or a scotch she's got behind her back. I call her Eleanor of aspartame. That's not the center one. There, it's that one. My interest in pollinator patches began actually quite a while ago. It started on a trip to Texas in the springtime, and this is what it was like going down the highway, and then we came back to Ontario. And we chanced on this in West Virginia, and we came back to Ontario. And I'm sure you get it by now. That's Ireland and Ontario. And so I thought there must be a way of beautifying Ontario. And so it began with a beautification idea. And it was very quickly turned into a way of putting native plants back into our roadsides. And so that's where roadsides began, was with native plants only. But it didn't take long until I realized that native plants and bees go together. And I read an article by Peter Kevin, the plight of the bumblebee, and realized that our bees are in trouble. And this, I read Dr. Lawrence Packer's book on keeping the bees. If you want a really good book on explaining the plight of the bees, Keeping the Bees by Lawrence Packer of York University is a good one. If all birds dropped dead tomorrow, he said, only chicken farmers and academic ornithologists would be inconvenienced. If all the bees died out, there would be worldwide food shortages, and perhaps 1/4 of the human population would starve. And you know, after looking at what's happening this week, that's not very far wrong. You should be reading about the almond industry in California. They're having great trouble this year with their almond crop because the bees are not there to pollinate it. So what's all the fuss about? This bees have bad hair days. Doesn't he look sick? It's a worldwide problem, and I don't need to tell you about it. I'm sure you're aware of colony collapse disorder, where bees are disappearing from the hives almost overnight. I watched a show on television lately where some of the beekeepers lost over 70% of their bees this winter. One of the possible reasons is pesticide use. In Ontario, we're doing a lot to overcome that, but there's still a lot of pesticides used. And while I'm on pesticides, I have to show you something I found this week. This is from the Bayer Company. This is the ultimate bug killer they're selling, with seeds for bees attached to it. What are they thinking? This is in Britain, not in Canada, but I'm saying, duh. Has it not hit them yet? Also, for our bees, it's habitat loss. No place to stay. Our bees need a pollen source, they need a nectar source, they need a nesting spot, and they need water. The nesting spot can be anything in your garden. Bumblebee would love an old clump of grass. Or a bumblebee box. You can build your own nest for if you wish. You'll notice in the nest there are two compartments. One is a foyer, and the other is the actual nesting box. Most of our bees are ground nesting bees, and we talked about that this morning. In fact, this morning just about did my talk. I love that top right one. Isn't that gorgeous? So bees live in the ground, or they put their eggs in the ground, actually. And again, I'll reiterate what we found this morning. Mulch may be a problem. If you're mulching too deeply, you may eliminate the possibility of bees nesting in your garden. Leave some stems. That messy garden from this morning? Yes, 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 yes. Leave some stems in your garden. Raspberry canes are great. Cut flower is perfect. Roses are pretty good. Or make a variety of holes for them. This is a combination. You know, one size doesn't fit all, so try your luck on as many sizes as you can. Through my research, I found out, especially for mason bees, a 5/16 inch drill is about the best to make the holes. Bamboo is great. Make a bee hole. Another shelter for bees. And you can see some along the wall today. There's a lodging house full, or almost full. And this is what happens. This is the mason bee. And what she does is crawl into the cavity in the branch or wherever, or the hole you've drilled, bring in pollen and nectar together, lay the egg on top, you can see the little eggs, then close it up with a wall of mud and start all over again. I understand she lays the eggs of the girls first and the guys last, and so the guys are the first ones out. It's like marketing, last in, first out. I guess that's because if you want to save from predators, they get the guys first. Leafcutter bees do much the same thing, although they don't use mud to seal up, they use leaves. Leafcutter bee, you're saying? There you go. I'll bet if you have roses, you notice this in the roses. That's leafcutter bees. And leafcutter bees are very important for the alfalfa crop. There they are. So it would be almost mirror of what the mason bee does. The little divisions, though, are made from leaves. Actually, she makes a little container to put her egg in. Bees need a place to stay, but they also need a pollen and a nectar source. And that's where I come in. I think gardeners have a responsibility. If we're going to till the land and not grow veggies, then we should do something else useful. And what we can do as gardeners is make a place for bees. I made the plot, the pollinator plot, as easy as possible because I wanted it to be something that someone like me could do. And if you're like me, it's Wednesday before your knees operate correctly. And so I needed to have something that could be accomplished by 1 or 2 people easily within a summer. And so it's a plot 10 by 20. Sort of lasagna gardening, only not really. I used about 70 plants, and I maintained it for 3 years. The one I did, just to try it out and make sure it works, was on this piece of land. It's not really on a roadside, it's on, well, it is. It's on the side of the street in Barrie, on vacant land. Next to it is a dog park, and next to that is a veggie garden, a community garden. I had to apply to the city with a proposal, so be prepared if you're going to do one of these to write a proposal. A proposal to the city, and they thought, this is a wonderful idea. Why don't you put your garden around the community garden? And I said, you're not understanding. This is not a garden. I will not be cleaning it up. It will not be tended. It's a pollinator patch. Oh, well, I think we can find you a spot. And there it is, full of fescue. My soil source. I needed a lot of soil to cover it. I'm not going to dig. I'm old. I don't dig anymore. So I found a construction site, and luckily the manager of the construction site was there, and I said, you have dirt, I want dirt. And he said, okay, lady, first of all, it's okay, lady. Once we backfill, if there's any left, you're welcome to it. So he was good to his word. He even delivered it, or had the people deliver it right to my spot. So there's my soil. Now, it's not good soil, but I'm planting native plants. They're hardy. They're mean. They don't need triple mix. I had a lot of stones in it, which I didn't like. Well, I have a small garden, and I had never worked with 4 cubic yards of soil before. It's a lot of soil. So I did get some help here. And I needed newspapers. I went to 2 newspapers in Barrie. They say they don't save the newspapers, they turn it over to somebody else. So I found with somebody else, Metroland News, and I said, what do you do with your old newspapers? I need a carload of them. Again, what? But they did. They helped me. I put their name on the sign. And there they are, in my Honda Fit. And we're laying it on. Now first what we did is lay the newspapers down, but what we needed to do first, and this is applicable to a roadside, is there was no water source here, but I needed to make the papers wet for 2 reasons. One, if you don't make it wet, they blow away on you. And 2, they will rot or compost much more quickly if you start off with them very wet. So we made them wet. The city came along and helped me. I got all the blue containers I could get, and they filled them with water for me. This would be a tough job along the roadsides. So we wet the newspaper. Oh, what a dirty business. Wear rubber gloves. Newspapers are filthy. Laid it on as thickly as we could. We put all the newspapers I brought on there. And then we started adding the soil on top. Just right on top of those wet newspapers. That's my granddaughter. She's 24, so she can break. And it wasn't an easy task with those 4 cubic yards of soil. The young lad in the middle is a little, you know those young wanderers that you meet on the streets? He's one of those. He came over and said, what you guys doing? We're shoveling dirt. So he said, do you want some help? Sure. So he gave us a couple of hours of help. It's all finished, and I don't know whether you can see clearly or not, but there's a backbone going through it. Can you see the high level going through it? That's planned to be the naked area of the garden. The backbone will not be planted, or not much. It's left for nesting. And the rest is the garden. And there we are with our plants. Now I chose plants instead of seedlings for a couple of reasons. I've been talking to people a long time before we actually did this, and they said, Carol, seedlings are really difficult for native plants. Sometimes they germinate, sometimes they don't. Some need scarification, some don't need scarification. And the other reason was because I was born in the 50s, and I want things immediately, right? So I got them from Graham Buck. Do you know Graham Buck at Death River Nurseries? I got my plants from Graham Buck. He gave me an awful lot of help too about which plants would be okay for my area, which plants would probably have grown there originally. And I needed to have native plants, by the way, for a third reason. I was getting a Ministry of Natural Resources grant, provided that I use native plants. So I used natives. And there I am, the last plant goes in. Of course, I took the privilege of putting in the last plant. And that's the 1st June. You see, it's not a garden. It's just a patch. We have had to fight the fescue around it for most of the time. We bought a cordless weed whacker, and we weed whack around it. Oh, I forgot to tell you, before I put that newspaper down, we weed whacked the area right down to the soil, right down till it was kicking up dust. Instead of tilling the soil. Anyway, there we are, the 1st June. And you know, build it and they'll come. In the summertime when things are growing, there's always at least 1, if not 4 or 5 bees in this little patch. How they found it, I don't know. There it is in October 2011, and you can see on the left-hand side the one plant that Graham Buck did not suggest. That's the cup plant, but I had to have one.
Yeah.
And the same thing in July 2012. And you can see the cup plant in the far right. We don't ever clean it up. I do weed a bit, but not very much. But one of the biggest problems we had was watering. When I put the plants in at first, and for the 1st year, they do need watering because they haven't established themselves yet. They will get humongously long roots, but not for a year or 2. So that 1st year was very critical. But there is no water supply on the side of a road. And so we used watering cans. There's a lovely man I married. He said, am I ever lucky? He goes along with this stuff. We're doing what? So there's our low-tech answer to watering. 3 bladders from Canadian Tire and 2 watering cans. And the 3 bladders, each bladder will fill both watering cans. And so that's what we used the 1st summer and the 2nd summer. And there's our plan. You must have a plan. And you can see that bare spot down the middle. And the plants I used, I'll go through a few of them for you. The one that was so successful was wild strawberry. It is a wonderful little plant. I got quite a few, but as a ground cover, keeping out the rest of the weeds, it's just great. And one of the things I bought it for, and it wasn't to keep out the weeds, I didn't know about its properties, was that it's an early plant because I needed to have flowers, pollen, and a nectar source from early spring to late fall for the bees. So the strawberry was one that would grow early. The other early ones are 2 shrubs, chokecherry and New Jersey tea. Chokecherry because I knew it would bloom early. New Jersey tea because I've never grown it and it has this neat name, Ceanothus. The mid-season plants, Rudbeckia hirta I have. I wanted Rudbeckia fulgida because it's a nice perennial and I wouldn't have had to worry about it too much. But Graham said, no, Carol. Fulgida did not grow in your area naturally, so it'll be hirta. Well, hirta is a biennial sometimes and sometimes an annual. You have to hope that it reseeds, but it did. Some butterfly weed, and that's what he did. That's the orange one. I didn't put any, I don't think I put anything but butterfly weed in. I didn't put Syriaca, which is the roadside milkweed. I would have loved to have put that in because it's such a gorgeous smelling plant in the springtime. But it puts down a root system that is daunting. put it in. Golden Alexanders, I'll show you those. You probably haven't seen those. Purple coneflower, and I have some grasses. And of course, for the fall, I had to have goldenrod and asters. What a beautiful combination is goldenrod and asters. And some Joe Pye weed. It's not the perfect place for Joe Pye weed. It should be a little damper, but I love that flower. So there's, again, some of the natives that we used. The Herta, the butterfly weed, the chokecherry. I didn't use elderberry, but I could have for the early one. Lacing stars, the golden Alexander, gray goldenrod. Now there's a lot of goldenrods, and I just picked, okay, that one. New England aster, New Jersey tea. And there's the grasses I used. I used little blue stem, side oats grandma because it sounds so cute, and panic and vergatum because it goes a nice red in the fall. There's some of the natives, you can see them there. That blue one is New Jersey tea, but my variety is white. I was a little disappointed. There's a strawberry down in the middle. The one in the very middle, the pink one, is actually the milkweed Asclepias incarnata, but it likes a little moister area than we have there, so I didn't plant that one. But if you want it in your garden, if you have a little moist area in your garden, oh, plant it. It smells like, do you remember cherry coke? It smells like that. There's golden Alexanders. Apparently, they were in my area historically. I saw some when we were down in the Rideau Lakes area last year, and they're growing well in our garden. There's Ceanothus. New Jersey tea, a nice early bloomer. And here's my commitment. And this, again, is for those gardeners that don't have a lot of energy and that perhaps are not capable of doing a big garden but want to do something for the pollinators. Year one is the hard one. Year one is 2 days of planting and lots of watering and weeding. Give them a chance. Year two is watering only during dry periods and some weeding for some invasives. Now, the invasive that I had, of course, is that festuca, but there was also a thistle in the area. And so I like to keep that thistle down as much as I can. Year three is a weaning year. Watering only if it's very bad. Very, very dry. Otherwise, they've got to learn to live on their own. By the way, I only lost 2 plants in those 3 years, so that's pretty good. And weeding just a bit. We still weed whack around the outside. This year, I would do nothing but weed whack around the outside. Now, this is the year, if I had the energy, I should put another unit on, start it over again. Because one little 10 by 20 patch, although it's going to do some good, is not as good as 2 patches would be, or 3 patches, or 4 patches. So this would be the year that you would start another patch. And of course, you might, if you were good, use the seeds from your original patch on your new one. So you see, and Ontario has room to spare. This is a perfect location for a pollinator patch because it has room to pull your car off the side of the road and still room to garden. So you want the safety. If you're planting along the roadsides, you want to always be safe. When I started this project, I got in touch with the Ministry of Transport. And it was a guy that was heading the landscape department then. And I told them in Washington, I don't know how he knew, but somehow he knew this was this little, fat, gray-haired lady talking to him. And I could just hear his thought processes. Oh my God, planting on the side of the 401. You know, so I could hear it. So you have to make it safe. And that's something that he was worried about, and I would be too. But this is what we could have, you see? It gives you the space for the highways to cut, and still a place for plants. So that's in Virginia. The way they do it, by the way, is some of the garden clubs raise money, give it to the Department of Highways, and the Department of Highways does the planting. So that's an interesting way of doing it. And we have room. That nice man at the Ministry of Transport suggested to me that we use the clover leaves because people have slowed down and there's usually access to the clover leaves. And there is a study done where bees are fine on a clover leaf. So you might do that. Pick a clover leaf near you, plant it up. The first one I was going to do would be poppies, but then they're not native, so. The service centers along the highways, they all have gardens. Why couldn't we do a garden there of natives? And there's acres and acres and acres of lands under hydrocuts. Why not have the hydrocuts useful to pollinators? And bring back the edges to fields. When I come up here, I see, well, corn is king. And on the cornfields, they've taken down their fences and they plant the corn right to the property line. And there are no more edges along the highway unless it's the highway land. We need to put the edges back for many reasons. Pollinators are one of them. A lot of the invertebrates and a lot of the little vertebrates that we want to live on the edges. Edges are gold. Fruit growers could use it. They want mason bees to pollinate their fruit trees. Dandelions are perfect in the springtime. The mason bees, by the way, come out late April, 1st of May, and they're pretty well finished by July. So dandelions are perfect for mason bees too. They need something else besides blossoms. Planting boulevards. This is a picture of a boulevard that is now going to be planted in native plants. But I was telling somebody at noon that in Seattle, they have a corridor that goes right through their city. So there is pollinator land right through the city. Wouldn't it be nice and well? Parking islands should be natives. Community gardens can certainly do with some bees. But especially our gardens. We're responsible for the gardens, for the land that we own. So we should be doing something in our gardens. By the way, bees like working class gardens better. Working class gardens tend to have less hybridized plants in them. Good for bees. They don't like those fancy hybridized things with double petals and the rest of it. Keep it simple. Gardening for bees? Yeah, it does look a bit messy maybe. I don't know. This certainly isn't a bee garden. This is a bee desert. And in acres and acres of land in North America, all over Canada, all over the United States, in every new subdivision, there's this seed. Get rid of it. I took my grass off a long time ago. I don't have any grass in the front of my lawn, front of my house at all. I don't know what they call it, lawn, yard, I don't know. But anyway, I don't have any grass there anymore. Yes, your neighbors will look askance at you. But wear funny clothes and then they won't mind. It's sort of like, what is she doing now? Take it off. This is big. This is easier in lawn. You would want a small clump. I would suggest a few shrub clumps here to break this up. But I have a small lot in city. Why would I have grass? So I started on my boulevard too. So I don't have any grass on my boulevard. I don't have any grass in my backyard. My son-in-law next door to me has grass, but he has to cut his own, so. There's a garden. You need a path to walk through. But think of what could live in that environment. Not only bees, but the butterflies, the beetles, all sorts of things could live there. I think that's what we have to do, repay the earth. This could be your front lawn. Why not? You see, the bees depend on you and me now. They can't depend on corporations. They can't depend on the government. So it's you and me that has to do it. A little bit of photoshopping there. So be useful to the earth. Make it beautiful. And there is a guide, and I've left a couple of the booklets back there. Anybody pick one up? Yeah, I've left a couple of booklets back there, but you can get the booklet online. I have 3 websites, just me, Carol Dunk, or the Roadsides.Carol Dunk, which is a website that will give you information on pollinators also. And there's a link to this booklet also on Conservation Garden Ontario. I keep a conservation page for the Ontario Horticultural Society. All you need is to weed whack a little plot. If I can do it, you can do it. Well, if me and my granddaughter can do it, you can do it. The Pollinator Project should be your project for 2013. Make it so. Thanks.